Welcome to Mindfulness Alchemy for the Modern Soul. Thank you for viewing, liking, sharing, and subscribing. Thank you for helping the channel grow, and thank you for helping this recording write the algorithm so it can get to as many people as possible who would enjoy it just as much as you do. I really appreciate it, so keep it coming. My name is Esther Vidic, and I'm your designated spiritual life, therapeutic art life, and trauma-informed coach. And today's recording is rather special because it is an interview with the well-known and, in my opinion, rather amazing Andrew Feldmar. But before we begin, I would like to introduce Andrew to you. And this is his brief life story, if you will. So, Andrew Feldmar was born in 1940 in Hungary, Budapest. But when he was only 3.5 years old, his mother was taken to Auschwitz, his father to a labor camp, and his grandmother to the Budapest ghetto. Now, his father managed to arrange for a young Catholic woman to take Andrew in, and so for a year and a half, he was living with her and her children. And in order to protect him, Andrew had to be called by a different name. His relatives came back into his life around 1945, and after the defeat of the 1956 Hungarian Revolution at the age of 16, he migrated to Canada alone. He became a follower of the well-known and revolutionary Scottish psychiatrist R.D. Laing, who was also one of the leading figures of the counterculture of the 1960s. Laing, who later became Andrew's friend, was also his teacher and therapist. And following in the footsteps of his mentor, Andrew Feldmar practices a form of radical psychotherapy, if you will, where the aim of the therapist is to engage in a real, spontaneous, and honest relationship with the patient. His approach is based on the findings of research of interpersonal phenomenology, spiritual emergency, and the anthropology of healing. And Andrew rejects the labeling of human suffering and therefore distances himself from the mainstream forms of psychiatry and psychotherapy, which are very much based on the concept of labeling and mental illness. His latest book, Credo, is a philosophical and autobiographical memoir. And while this book is his English debut, he has published many, many books in Hungarian. He lectures, he teaches, and he provides supervision and therapy internationally. With over 52 years of experience, having spent more than 100,000 hours in psychotherapy with clients. He also has been notably successful treating psychotic patients, and he is a well-known expert in psychedelic-assisted psychotherapy. Andrew also holds an honors BA in mathematics, physics, and chemistry from the University of Toronto, as well as an MA in psychology from the University of Western Ontario. He is an honorary life member of the Canadian Psychological Association. But he's also a husband and a father of two now fully grown children, and a truly amazing human being, in my opinion. I am super excited and honored to have him on the podcast. I have listened to many of his talks, and his insight and wisdom have definitely been life-changing for me. So I hope you'll enjoy today's interview. And with all that said, Let's welcome Andrew Feldmar to the podcast. Welcome to the podcast, Andrew. How are you
Hello.
today?
Very well, thanks.
It's good to hear. So, now, if you're ready, let's begin.
Great.
And my first set of questions is this, and it relates to your early childhood somewhat. But this is something that I strongly believe to be a powerful thing in our human interactions. So, my question to you is this: what does it do really when we embody or practice genuine kindness? And why is it important to be aware of what we do and who we are when it comes to conducting ourselves in the world and in society?
Well, I don't know how to approach the question um, simply and to the point. Uh, I think it has to do with my realization that there is only one life. Um, and that same life lives you as well as it lives me, as well as it lives everything, plants, animals, anything that's alive is lived by some mysterious energy. Um, so I usually show it like this, that it looks like we are separate people here, but actually we are one. And there are ways of consciousness going from thinking that this is me down to where I am one with all living creatures. Now, if, although you look separate, I realize that the same life lives you as lives me, then it's a no-brainer that why would I not treat you like I would treat myself? Why would I not want to help you if you're in trouble? Why would I, this I, not love all of me equally, even if I show up in different forms? Whether this is a dog, this is a tree, and this is you and this is me, why wouldn't we want to enjoy ourselves? Because it looks to me like life is playing, life is waving, life is becoming. So the Hippocratic Oath, by the way, says, do no harm.
Mm.
Um, Notice it doesn't say do good, because the road to hell is paved with good intentions. Uh, I may think I'm doing something wonderful, but it may be hell for you. So in therapy, since most of my time I spend talking with other people, I try to make sure that people's lives don't become more difficult with me in it than it was without me. I mean, that's minimal, but it's not easy. So I think the meaning of life has something to do with being there for the other. Now, I think it's a very deep impulse, almost before decision. We are born that way. Levinas, a philosopher of ethics, says the other is more important than I am. The other wounds me, opens me up. And actually, I think George Bernard Shaw comes to mind, who said, a good death is being exhausted by doing what you can for other people, serving other people. Because you're serving life, you're serving the life that lives you.
Hmm. That's that's really brilliant. I like your take on that. So that takes us now to to the second question. And I would like to quote you here from one of your talks. And I love what you said because it expresses what love is in such a simple yet brilliant way, in my opinion. And you said, love is taking delight in the other as the other is in their isness without wishing them to be otherwise. But what can we do with the people we cannot delight in? What is the best strategy one can adopt to live and let live, in your opinion?
Well, in therapy, if I can't delight in the person who comes into my consulting room, I refer that person to someone else, hoping that someone else can delight in that person. It would be bad faith for me to spend time with anyone reluctantly, because there are millions of unconscious messages that we give each other. And non-verbally, I will probably communicate my dislike, which would then probably put the person into the same double bind as they may have experienced in their own family. Is come here, go away. That you're welcome, but I don't want you. Which is crazy making. So I wouldn't want to do that, and I can't pretend. It's not a question of technique. If I can't take delight in you, I refer you on. I don't pick a fault with you, and I'm not saying it's your fault. It's my fault. I mean, I imagine that if I were a totally evolved human being, I could delight in anyone. But I don't. I'm not a totally evolved human being, so I have to be honest and hope that someone I refer you to will be able to be genuinely glad that you're there with them. All the people I am working with now, I look forward to being with. Now, you said something about live and let live. What comes to my mind is A.S. Neil, who ran in England a school for wayward children who nobody else could handle, called Summerhill. And they only had one rule, and it worked beautifully, which was everybody was free, because everybody is free. You cannot not be free. We are all condemned to freedom, but they recognized and told the children that they were free. You didn't have to go to any classes. You didn't have to do anything you didn't want to. Attendance was never taken. Nothing was compulsory. On the other hand, the other rule was you can't take license. And what they meant by you can't take license is you can't interfere with anyone else's freedom. So, for example, if a few kids were reading Emily Dickinson quietly, and another kid came in blowing his tuba, 3 or 4 staff members immediately arrived, picked up the kid with the tuba, and ran with him to a soundproof room where he could continue playing his tuba. They didn't interfere with his freedom to play the tuba, but he was not allowed to interfere with the freedom of the children who wanted to read Emily Dickinson. So this distinction between freedom and taking license worked perfectly. And I think that's the best way to describe live and let live.
I think it's really brilliant. And I agree with this a great deal. And it sounds really good. I wish we could do more of it in life. More of us do more of this in life. And so now that we talked about this, love and live and let live, I would like us to turn this within And so my next question to you is this. What is self-love or love for oneself? In your opinion, what is the impact of extending grace and kindness towards ourselves and the power of love and acceptance and forgiveness?
Um, well, there are two ways of being in the world. One is I am I, and say it like Popeye says it. Don't try to change me. Don't rearrange me. Woo-hoo, I'm Popeye the Sailor Man. He's very happy to be himself. I am I. It's a tautology. It works. It's true. The other way to be in the world is I don't want to be me. At the bottom of a lot of depression, at the bottom of a lot of so-called psychopathology, lies an attitude that I don't want to be me, which is a paradox, and it's nonsense, because the truth is I am I. So talk about the hatred of reality. Anyone who feels or says, I don't want to be me, suffers from the hatred of reality, and it's like running headlong into a wall, causing yourself injury because you say that wall shouldn't be there. The wall is there. Hello. Radical acceptance of reality helps. Radical acceptance of myself helps. Now, if you realize that there is no organism without environment, like right from the moment your father's sperm hit your mother's egg, and you became incarnated into the first zygote that you were in your mother's fallopian tube, most likely, you were already in an environment. Your mother was your environment. There is no living creature without an environment, no organism without an environment. So, out of that, it's absolutely obvious, and Buddhist psychology is built on it. If I am the organism, which I am, my job is to get to know myself, is to accept myself, take delight in myself as much as I can, never think of improving myself in any way. In fact, Buddhist psychologists would call that violence towards oneself. And put all one's energy into creating an environment for myself that compensates me for who I am. So work on the environment, not on yourself. And here, a metaphor I use often comes to mind that, say, there's a fish in tall grass. It's a very unhappy fish. I'm not going to give it psychotherapy. I'm not going to give it psychiatric medication. I'll pick it up and run with it to the next body of water, put it in the water, change the environment, not the fish, and it will be a very happy fish. So, and the environment means other people. E. Cummings, one of my favorite poets, says, I am through you, so I. Laing used to say, you're only as smart as the company you keep. After age 16, I think we are responsible for the company we keep. It's part of our environment. So if in a certain environment I don't feel good about myself, why would I want to stay there? Why would I want to adapt to the environment unless somebody has taken away my freedom, unless I'm in jail, unless I'm captured? And then I'll make the best of it. But if I am free, I will not stop until I find people in whose company I feel good about myself. I find an environment where I will feel like a fish in water.
That reminded me of the saying that you can't change the people around you, but you can change the people around you.
Yeah.
And it took me personally, in my personal life, it took me a very, very long time to figure this out. There's absolutely nothing wrong with me, but not in the right company. And to change
Yeah.
that was life changing.
Well, we humans have the longest dependency of all animals, which means that up until a certain point, we are all captured and tortured. Uh, and it feels like if I don't like my mother, if I don't like my father, if I don't like my siblings, if I don't like my home as a kid, what am I going to do? Where am I going to go? So
Mm.
it's a habit that most of us develop that we can't leave our environment. We somehow have to make it. We have to adapt to it. And all children, anyways, think because cognitive development is slow. All children think if I feel bad, I am bad. Rather than if I feel bad, it's because someone is treating me badly. Children can't afford to realize that I feel bad because someone is treating me badly because there's no escape. So at least if I falsely think I feel bad because I am bad, because that's what my parents tell me, at least there is hope, which is I can get better. I can get so good that they are going to treat me well. So their treating me badly is my fault, is what is hypnotized into children. So it's quite an awakening to realize there's nothing wrong with me. I can't stop until I find an environment that suits me. There is a fairy tale which is very good about the ugly duckling who turns out to be a swan. Didn't know she was a swan. And the ducks thought that was an odd duck. And it was a very unhappy duck until it realized that it's not a duck, it's a swan. And among swans was a happy swan.
And as I said, there are no coincidences. My mother believes that we all have a story, like a fairy tale. And once she told me that my story is the ugly duckling. So how fitting. And and so let's get to our next question. And now that we talked about love for ourselves and acceptance and forgiveness and so on, we understand that we all experience wounding events in our lives, one way or another. May it be rejection, abandonment, humiliation, betrayal, injustice, and so on. In what way can these unhealed, unloved, unresolved wounds and aspects of ourselves lead to our own misery? And what can we do so these experiences won't rob us of our joy in the long run? What can we do to live life to the fullest, so to speak?
Well, we have to be careful with our language. Because, of course, what you just said, the question is full of metaphors. And from my point of view, they are hackneyed, overused, and inaccurate metaphors. I don't think I was ever wounded. There are no wounds and there is no healing, in my opinion. It's just a convenient but false way of thinking about it. When I was maybe about 7, up in the Hungarian mountains in the Matra. Every summer, my mother took me up there for holidays. And I made friends with some of the locals, especially with one shepherd. I was, as I say, about 7. He was maybe 19. And I looked up to him, and every morning I went with him to tend the sheep. And we had lots of time. The sheep were grazing, had good talks. And at a certain point, he lit up a cigarette. And with a smile on his face, he said to me, "Would you like to see me blow smoke out of my ears?" I got very excited. I've never seen any. My mother was a smoker, but never through the ears. I said, "Sure." So I said, "Okay, sit down facing me." He wanted to hold my right hand in his right hand. And he took a big puff. He said, "Look into watch my ears, eyes on my ears." And at that point, he put out his cigarette on my hand that he held in his hand. And so I felt this enormous pain. I realized what was happening. I jumped up crying and ran away. Now, that's trauma. That's every unwanted experience in one's life has the structure of what I just described.
Mm-hmm.
That's trauma. But really, what is it? It's a disaster. It's not trauma. Trauma already is medicalized. It's a disaster. It's a disaster because I didn't expect it. It's sadistic. It's deliberately causing pain to an innocent person who wasn't expecting it. It breaks the relationship. And what kicks in is not a wound. The issue is evolution prepared us with 2 ways of learning. One is avoidance learning. You put your hand in fire, you never want to put your hand in fire. That's good for evolution. Otherwise, we have to learn from what is dangerous for us very fast. Can't afford to do it 2 or 3 times. One trial learning. Once burnt, never put your hand in fire. And that's very deeply ingrained for survival.
Yes.
Evolution doesn't care about quality of life. Evolution only cares about people living until they have children, and then evolution doesn't care. Learning to do something like play the piano takes thousands, millions of trials, not one trial. So learning to do something is very slow, very arduous, a lot of trials. Learning to avoid something, one trial. So I had an experience there that biologically, not even psychologically, I wanted to avoid. I never wanted that experience again. So then evolution went overboard. And of course, we tend to generalize. Like, was I going to avoid that particular boy? That would have been reasonable. I'll never speak to him again. I'll never go near him again. But am I going to avoid all Hungarian shepherds? Am I going to avoid all Hungarians? Am I going to avoid all males? Am I going to avoid all humans? You know, when Jean Améry, who was a Jew working underground in Paris during the Nazi occupation, was captured, and 2 men held him down on either side, and the 3rd man was walking towards him, smiling, looking into his eyes, and when he got close enough, with all his force, punched him in the stomach, so Améry doubled over. And then he wrote a book called Suicide, in which he says at that point, everything changed for him in his life, because there was no mark of Cain on the forehead of the man who punched him in the stomach. So from then on, he couldn't trust anyone, because he thought behind an innocent face, there could be somebody who could hurt him. And then after the war, he survived. After the war, he saw two of the three men in a French cafe, a sidewalk cafe in Paris. And they were having a great time drinking coffee and liquor. And it came to him that there is no justice in the world, because no one called them to task. They didn't have to answer for what they did to him. And he concluded his book by saying, in this world, I can't trust anyone, and there is no justice. I don't want to play. Don't you think for a moment that I killed myself because I'm psychiatrically ill or I'm mad or anything. It's a rational choice. I don't want to play in a world where I cannot trust anyone and there is no justice. He sent the book to the publisher and killed himself. Now, one can generalize that much. One more example. Freud had a little patient called, in the literature, Little Hans. He was a little boy who was terrified of women in fur coats in 1840s Vienna, 1900 Vienna. And Freud corresponded with the boy's father, and together they psychoanalyzed the little boy. Turns out that his mother was pushing him in a carriage on the street when a big furry dog came and barked into the little boy's face. And from then on, he was terrified of women in fur coats. So they figured that this tendency to generalize, to avoid, the little boy remembered the dog not as dog, but as fur, and generalized to everything furry. So that's what happens after a disaster, that you begin to generalize and you're afraid that what happened will happen again and you try to avoid it. So I could have avoided all humans. I could have avoided all Hungarians, just like little Hans avoided anything in fur. And so he avoided lots of wonderful experiences. There may have been beautiful women, loving women in fur coats that he could have played with. No way. So there is no wound. I wasn't wounded. I mean, I was wounded because he burnt a little hole in my hand. But psychologically, I wasn't wounded. I just wanted to avoid this happening again. Plus, there is also a mistaken way of thinking that humans have, that the past predicts the future, which it doesn't. You toss a coin, heads or tail, even if you have 100 heads by chance, the 101st, whether it's heads or tail, is still 50-50. The history of the throws does not influence what the next toss is going to be like. Lightning strikes me doesn't mean lightning will ever strike me again. And yet there are some of us who, if lightning struck me out of clear blue sky, for the rest of my life, I may want to avoid blue skies, thinking that if I avoid blue skies, I won't be hit by lightning. So the problem is this very deeply wired impulse to avoid anything that's associated with the painful event, the disaster that occurred in the past. So your question of what can one do is through meditation, for example, vipassana, mindfulness, you become aware. One of the magnificent uses of meditation is that it helps you to distinguish automatic habit patterns from heartfelt responses.
Mhm.
So if I can get rid of automatic habit patterns, I might be able to overcome the habit of avoiding anything associated with the past disaster. So it's a question of attention. It's a question of, habits are like viruses in a computer. So, and one can. The good news is that one can get rid of any habit one puts one's mind to.
Mm.
It takes time. Uh, there are good ways to uh, dissolve habits. It's almost like coming out of hypnosis. Um, you could have been given a post-hypnotic suggestion. You don't even know what was programmed into you until you wake up and realize what the post-hypnotic suggestion was, and you go against the grain and say, I will have the impulse to do what I always have done, and I'm not going to do it. Because habit is the illusion and freedom is the reality, as opposed to Skinner and some psychologists who say it the other way. Freedom is an illusion and habit is the reality. Not true.
That was really, really good. Thank you.
Yeah.
I, I like your take on this, and I was listening to you, and it really blew my mind open. So I really appreciate your honest answer. That's, uh, sorry, let me gather my thoughts after this one. So this next question kind of relates to what you just said, basically, because in this question, what I wanted to ask you is about the loss of trust and building higher walls and how to trust again. So, in your opinion, what can it do for us when we let go of victimhood and become the victor of our own story?
Well, again, I wouldn't use language that way. The power of positive thinking, it smells, what you just said, smells to me of the power of positive thinking, which has nothing to do with reality.
Mhm.
I think that uh, if I was victimized, if I was an innocent victim, I need to know that. The only way that I can fully grieve, fully mourn what they did to me or what was done to me or what happened is if I realize that I was an innocent victim. The metaphor I sometimes use is I'm walking on the sidewalk, minding my own business. A drunk driver careens up on the sidewalk and hits me. I lose consciousness. I wake up in hospital. The doctor informs me that they had to amputate both my legs. First, I won't believe it. Then, why me? Then I will get very angry, all sorts of things, but I will never have legs again. And that is also important. After the disaster, I will never be who I was or would have been without the disaster. There is no recovery. When Captain Kirk in Spaceship Enterprise, they collide with a meteorite. First thing he does, he goes on the bridge and says, "Damage report." He needs to know how many legs they lost and what else. And then he makes the best of a bad thing. He gets on with it nevertheless. No power of positive thinking. What have we still got? So after I realized that I will never have legs again, um, that's the moment where I can really mourn and grieve that I was an innocent victim and things just happen. unwanted experiences happen. And then I have to, the reflex to truly mourn and grieve comes from realizing that the loss is irretrievable, that no one can compensate me for what was lost. There is no compensation. And then after I mourned fully, I might have the energy to develop my upper body, to learn how to throw myself from the bed into the wheelchair, to find people who can love people without legs or befriend other people without legs and make the best of a bad thing. So I think the only thing that can ease the pain is full mourning and grieving, realizing it should never have happened. People should never have done to me what they have done to me. And it is based on I was an innocent victim. Now, I often thought, what would I have done if Jean Améry would have come and consulted with me before he killed himself? What could I have said to him that maybe would have made a difference? And really, I can only think of one thing, that possibly, one of his problems was that he can't trust anyone. I would have proposed to him, maybe I could teach him who is worth risking to trust and who is not worth risking to trust, so that he could distinguish that you don't have to trust everybody or you don't have to mistrust everybody, that actually, just like there's a philosopher friend of mine, Alfonso Linguis, who wrote an essay on lust. And he says, lust is very much like trust, totally irrational. Say there are a dozen people, who am I going to lust after? Probably there will be one that I could select, and I say, I want to have sex with you. The same thing. He travels a lot, Linguis, and indigenous people often offer to help with his luggage and so on. And there are 12 young people jumping, pick me, pick me. And he just looks, relaxes, and suddenly he is drawn to one of them. And he says, you, even though he doesn't speak their language, it's a feeling, I can trust you. And then trust engenders trust. So he realized that when he trusts someone, they become trustworthy. So I would have said to Améry, you have to advance trust. Nobody can earn your trust. You can say, I'll trust you, but don't betray me. Don't break my trust. You break my trust, you're toast. So that might have helped him. And about justice, I would probably say to him, well, justice is a messianic concept. The Messiah is never here. The Messiah is always to come. The Messiah will arrive, will keep a seat at dinner ready for him should he come. But he never comes. He's always coming in the future. Even if there is no justice in the world today, justice is to come. And I can spend a meaningful life in an unjust world, leaving the world a little more just than it was when I came into it. So again, it doesn't have to be black and white. No, I'm not sure that would have been sufficient for him. He may still have killed himself. And that's his prerogative. That's all. We are free to do that any moment. So there's nothing wrong with it. But those would have been the only two things I could have said. And, that's what comes to mind about trust. Once trust is broken, maybe it's like Humpty Dumpty. maybe all the king's men and all the king's sword, nobody could put Humpty Dumpty together again once he fell and broke. Like once trust is broken, there is no muscle for, now I trust you. With my children, of course, because I love them. If they broke my trust, I said, okay, fresh start. I'll advance trust. Don't fuck up this time. And then they fucked up, and then I advanced trust again. But if I would have said, no, you have to earn my trust, I would have had power over them indefinitely, and that's a very bad position to be in. I can't trust you yet. It will take another couple of years. That's torture. And by the way, there is no muscle for forgiveness. So this business, oh, you'll feel so much better if you forgive. Show me the muscles for forgiveness. No one can forgive by will. Forgiveness is a grace. Maybe one morning you wake up and realize that your heart is lighter, but not because of anything you did. I remember walking on the street with Laing in London, and a man came past us, and he stopped and he says, "That man, I know that man, and I can tell that I haven't forgiven him. I just forget what he did." So it's easier to forget than to forgive. Okay.
Isn't it? It's okay. I'm following. I'm actually grateful that I used the words that I used in the questions, because I really like your super honest and brutally honest take on things. And that's such an interesting perspective that I personally really value. So I think the other question that I had for you, and that's an important one, and I often refer to, and I always say that if need be, please do seek the help of a qualified professional, a therapist, a psychotherapist, whatnot. Because I think that sometimes we really need someone's tender love and care and the space to be held for us in order for us to be able to speak our truth and to come to terms with things. So my question to you is this: what can a good therapist do for us in terms of holding space from the level of consciousness, and how important it is to seek help and also to find the right fit?
Okay. I would quote Ferenczi, Sándor Ferenczi, Hungarian psychoanalyst in Freud's time. He said a good therapist needs to have two qualities. One is absolutely zero ambition, and the second is a lot of time. I 100% agree with him. The therapist has to learn to desire nothing. What the therapist can do that no one else can do for the patient is create a space where the patient can listen to his or her own desires, however quiet they are, without being overwhelmed by the desire of the other. If the therapist has even the slightest desire, say, for example, for the patient to get better, it's a mistake. Whether the patient gets better or not is not the therapist's business. The therapist basically has to be present and learn to listen. One of my colleagues in London, Leon Redler, wrote a book called Just Listening. And he pointed that that's all a therapist needs to do. But the just means two things: only listen and listen fairly, justly.
Mm-hmm.
No opinion, no judgment, just listening, welcoming listening. I think that people come into therapy because no one listens to them, and maybe no one has listened to them.
Mm.
Um, the therapist doesn't have to do anything. I think the business of therapy is a very feminine enterprise. Even if a man, like I've been doing this for over 50 years, and it's a totally feminine enterprise. No masculine energy needs to enter. It's a holding, it's an allowing, it's a taking seriously. There is also basically, it comes down to what can any human being do for another. I don't think therapists have to be specialists. I think therapists have to be open-hearted, welcoming people. So what can anyone do for another? We can give each other shelter. Now, if somebody comes to see me once a week, the shelter is my consulting room with me in it, where no one will attack them. What I have to communicate effectively to the most disturbed patient is that I'm harmless, that I will do no harm. So while they are there, in a way, in my room, I give them asylum, shelter. The other thing a human being can do is I can encourage the other. Very rarely do we get encouragement. Most people discourage us, and even in our homes. So encouragement is one of the very few things I can do. And the third one I would call demystification. And that's the kind of thing that you said I was brutally honest. Because, for example, if in language somebody says this happened and that happened, I would say nothing ever happens. Who did what to whom? Sartre and Laing said who did what to whom is praxis. What happened is process. And process just mystifies, hides the truth of who did what to whom. There is a taboo against being exactly correct and real about describing and depicting who did what to whom. And it can lift a lot of guilt, a lot of shame, a lot of mystification. So really, those are the only three things: give shelter, encourage, and demystify.
Yes, that was really, really brilliant. And we are almost at the top of the hour, but I have one last question for you. And this is this: from your level of understanding and with your experience and wisdom gained over the years, what would you say the meaning of life is?
Okay, that's a good note to finish on. Uh, maybe you could put in Hallelujah. You know how Leonard Cohen sings it behind this. Because I think in many catechisms, Scottish Presbyterian catechism, Laing used to tell me, because he was a Scotsman, there's the question of why did God put us on earth? And the answer is to praise the Lord. And how do we praise the Lord? Well, by singing hallelujah. And how can you sing hallelujah? Well, from the heart in a state of beatitude. Now, beatitude, the literal meaning of the word is supreme happiness. So actually, people who say they are depressed, they are sinners. Like that's what God doesn't want. God wants you to find a way to supreme happiness. Now, interestingly, the very first book on ethics that I have found was Aristotle's book on ethics. And he said more than 2,000 years ago that he's writing this book on ethics. And what is ethics? Ethics is how we treat each other, it's the study of how we treat each other. So Aristotle said, I'm not writing this book in order to show you how to be good. I'm writing this book because if you're not ethical, if you hurt other people, if you treat other people badly, and you allow other people to treat you badly, you will never be happy. The Greek word for beatitude or supreme happiness was eudaimion. And Aristotle said the purpose of ethics is eudaimion, is happiness. And I think that's the meaning of life. I mean, look at a tiger, look at an eagle. What's their purpose? Like, they are having so much fun. They play, they run, they wrestle. Right? That's the meaning of life, is find your way to supreme happiness.
Thank you so much. That I
All
think
right.
that's a brilliant way to finish today's recording. Andrew, I
Good.
thank you for your time. I really enjoyed spending time with you.
Thank you for asking me. Bye.
Bye bye.